So I'm here with Steven Levine from the Coffee Quest here in Medellin, Colombia. And Backyard Beans Coffee, I've been buying coffee from Steven for 5 years now. And Steven and his team here in Colombia, they do a lot of work to connect with the farmers. And I just want to break it down to show kind of how you get good quality coffee, especially quality coffee. So there's three places where this happens. So we have the farm level, we have the buying stations that you have throughout the country, and then here we're at the cupping lab, and there is the dry mill behind us here, where coffee is milled before it's exported.
Correct.
So let's start at the farm level. What do you do with farmers in order to produce specialty coffee?
So, of course, the farmers, they do all the work at the farm level. So what our role is when we work with farmers is to evaluate the coffee that they produce. So the very first step is with a farmer who might be new to our network is to evaluate their coffee, to cup their coffee, which is really the same as what we do with every farmer that even the farmers that we've been working with for years. So we always ask for a sample, and then we evaluate that sample, and then based on that sample, based on our experience and what we've seen with coffee production is, what do we think that the farmer could do to potentially improve it? Now, of course, there are some farmers that just naturally already have great coffee, so we say, hey, thanks, we'd love to buy it. You know, how much is available, or how much do you produce? But the vast majority could make simple adjustments that don't even have to be so technical, and can improve their coffee several points.
So what are some of the things that make for a better quality coffee?
Starting backwards, there's a lot that goes into, I'd say the drying process is really important. Making sure it's not done too quick, making sure that it's done uniform and evenly. It's something that we see a lot of farmers struggle with. They think like, you'll go into where their drying beds are, and it'll be pretty warm in there. And so the idea is it'll dry down the coffee pretty quick, but what we look for is cup quality, but also shelf life. And so some folks from the team might go visit and say, hey, is it possible to kind of open the curtains in the drying bed so that there's more airflow to slow down the drying?
Yeah, you get a lot of rain here in Colombia too, so that could be challenging for the drying.
It can be challenging for the drying. From like a shelf life standpoint and a slow dry standpoint, it's good because it doesn't get so hot. But with too much rain, then the coffee will never actually get dried. But so what we'll do is we'll evaluate the coffee. Of course, a lot comes down to the picking. The picking is really important. So it's like, hey, do you think you could work with the pickers to improve, more ripe cherries? It's like if we're at a farmer's market and someone's selling red ripe strawberries and some that have half red, half white, everyone's going to be buying the red ripe strawberries. So it's the same with coffee. You want to pick as many ripe beans as possible. Once the coffee gets to the wet mill, are they depulping it right away?
The wet mill is on the farm.
Wet mill's on the farm. So the farmers in Colombia, generally, it's changing a little bit, but they do the entire process there, from picking all the way to drying. And so when we receive the sample, it's already dried and in dry parchment.
Dry parchment, which is a layer that's around the seed that the coffee dries in. And when you guys receive it, it's in parchment, and then you have to hull it and sample roast it. Before we move on to the buying stations, I just wanted to hit on the varieties. So as we visited farms the last few days, I saw farmers who had planted a lot of different varieties, and they're keeping them separate and selling them to you or to whoever buyer. So some of the varieties that we saw, if you could hit on some of those and how those affect cup quality.
So what we're seeing these days is a lot of, depending on the region, the majority of the varieties out there these days are Caturra, Colombia, and Castillo are the three main varieties. There's less and less Caturra these days, and we are seeing farmers renovate their farms they're getting rid of the Caturra, and then they're replanting something like a Castillo and a Colombia. There's a lot of other varieties out there. There's Tabis, there's Geishas, there's Bourbon Cedars, but the main three are Caturra, Colombia, Castillo. What we're seeing is that they're renovating the Caturra, they're getting rid of it, and they're either replanting Castillos and Colombias, or they're going to the pink Bourbon route. And the pink Bourbon is a variety that's really exploded. It started in southern Huila, but it's exploded all over the country, and it has a really good cup quality, and it has a higher price tag. So farmers are really interested
and that's new, like the last 5-6 years?
About 5-6 years
been
ago.
spreading.
Yeah, it was identified in southern Huila as well, in a region that we went to, Acevedo, and now it's exploded.
Yeah.
Farmers are planting it everywhere in good volumes, and it's great. It has really beautiful cup quality. It placed first in our Huila Mágico competition, and we use it in a couple of different coffees that we offer, whether it's a microlot or some of our communal lots as well.
So at the buying stations, how many of those do you have? You have those, we visited a couple, one in Pitalito and one around Gigante.
Yep.
How many stations do you have?
We have 11 stations currently. Some of them are ours, and then some we work with partners in different regions where it's their buying station, but we send one of our cuppers. And the great thing about that is that they allow us to work the same exact way as if it were our buying station, our partner. Before we go there, we say, hey, this is how we work. This is how we work with farmers. This is how we work with individual lots. And then we work exactly the same as if it were ours.
So at the buying stations, you have a staff member, a coffee buyer who's also a cupper.
Yep.
And so at the stations, they are hauling parchment to sample roast
Samples,
it,
yep.
to cup it, and then they cup it again,
Yep.
and then it's also cupped here. So these coffees are cupped 3 times. So
At
you
a
have-
minimum.
At a minimum. And so you guys have a lot of cuppers on staff to give feedback to farmers and to provide the farmers a value for their coffee. So
Exactly.
whether it's an 83-point coffee up to an 87-point coffee, you guys have a structure. One thing you mentioned with the coffee buyers is they have a WhatsApp group, and they're sending out to the farmers they have relationships with each day what the price for coffee is, because it fluctuates.
Exactly. Yep.
So that's the buying stations. Lots of tracking. You guys just keep everything separated and labeled, and it's just a lot that goes into creating microlots. But not only microlots, like we saw, there's a lot of work that goes into producing these group lots and these blended group lots, because you're trying to create a flavor profile.
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to mention, like, we buy those coffees. We buy a lot of those coffees. Our organic Colombia. We buy a lot of these regional blends for our bandwidth espresso blend. Sometimes our seasonal blends have these regional lot Colombias in them. And then we also buy La Victoria, which is like in between a regional lot and a micro lot.
Yep, exactly.
So that's a blended lot of coffees that you guys kind of curate. After you cup them and separate them, decide this is going to go into La Victoria, which is almost micro lot quality, but not quite. So then the micro lots, we're buying less volume of those. And those seem to be the hardest coffees for you guys to find, right?
So just take a quick step back. We treat all of our coffees the exact same way from a quality control perspective and a logistics perspective. So whether it's a amazing micro lot or one of our kind of regional kind of communal lots or a La Victoria, they're all treated exactly the same. So they're cupped anywhere from between every single lot between 3 or 4 times from a quality control perspective.
Yeah.
And then
it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, but it ensures that the quality of every bag that your customers buy or every cup of coffee that they get in the cafe or the farmer's market or wherever is exactly the same during the lifespan of that coffee that you're working with. The micro lots are the toughest. So when we talk about working with farmers at the farm level, there's a lot of really kind of basic things that you don't have to be an agronomist, you don't have to be, a specialist to make these small adjustments. They're just small adjustments that a lot of farmers could make that can take their coffees up a point or two. And those are the things that we really, really work closely with the farmers, because they're fairly simple, to be honest, that can be done easy. And then the farmers that are a bit more advanced, those are the ones that we do different trials with, whether it's more advanced processing, whether we're using inoculating with yeast or what have you. But the majority, when we work with them, we cup it, we taste it. Hey, what's going on here? The cuppers will go to the farms generally between harvest when there's more time, and say, hey, like, what is your processing? What are you doing now? Show me from front to back, and then from there they'll make some recommendations. One thing I want to point out is that every farm is different. So every recipe at their wet mill is different. So it's really tough to go in and say, hey, just do this, this, and this, and then you have a beautiful microlot.
Right.
It just doesn't work like that. But one thing that we do is that We're very comfortable making recommendations because no matter what the outcome is, we'll still buy that coffee. If we make some suggestions or we work together with the farmer to make some changes and it comes out as a microlot, amazing. But if it comes out a little bit less or comes out as like a regional quality because we got to make different changes, we'll still buy it all.
Awesome. Yeah, we visited a farm yesterday who was a new relationship who you bought a very small amount from last year. And it was cool to see your coffee buyer from that region interacting with this farmer, kind of listening and hearing what the farmer does, and then offering some suggestions of what's working with surrounding farmers, some tweaks to be made, some things to do with the fermentation, the drying, to help bring his coffee to cup it higher.
To a higher level, exactly. I mean, if the farmer's willing to put in 100%, we're willing to give them 110% of our time and effort. It's really, it's a mutual commitment, right? If we're going to spend, there's a lot of farmers that, as you saw, they're all very remote. It takes a lot of time just to get to one farm. So we want to work with farmers that are committed and willing to put that effort in. One thing that's super important is there's no financial investment in these changes, at least in the beginning. It's all just with currently what they're working with, and based on what they're working with, what small changes can be made to improve quality.
Right. So just last thing with the buying stations, the relationship is the most important thing.
It's everything.
Is what I saw.
It's
a lot of time that your staff takes to be reaching out to these producers, texting them, messaging them, visiting them.
Calling them, everything.
Calling them, everything. And so the relationship is super important. And what are ways that you guys find these farmers, and how do you go out looking for them? Do they come to you?
It's, I always say in coffee, it's always random and never random, but we look for farmers in, every method. I have our buying station. We didn't have the Coffee Quest up there, but we have a sign that says, hey, we're specialty coffee buyers. So sometimes they pass by and they might just walk in. But the absolute best way that we find new farmers is through referrals. So I don't know if you noticed, but at the second farm we were at, Fernando, yesterday, who we've been working with for a few years, he's like, hey, no, I'm happy to organize a meeting with some farmers, with neighbors. Actually, my cousin lives over here. I'm more than happy to speak with him. So what he'll do is he'll actually organize a meeting, and then Jessica will go, and then now hopefully we can work with more farmers.
Word of mouth.
Yeah, word of mouth is
trust,
a big,
and it's a little bit of trust from the people they know. That's awesome.
Exactly. I'm in different WhatsApp groups, so I'll come across farmers, and they'll be talking about their farms, and I'll see it, and depending on the region, I'll say, hey, Jessica, do you mind reaching out? Actually, it's random. Oh, there's a trade show in Colombia as well, and randomly I found a card from years ago. It's a women's producer group, and it's a few years ago. I'm like, I'm not sure if they're still around. And I found the card, and I was like, hey, Jessica, can you actually reach out and see if they're still working together, the group, and they are. So Jessica will go and visit them. They'll set up a meeting. A lot of it's meetings, and we do a ton of one-on-one. But at least when we're getting started, group meetings are huge because we can talk to 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 farmers at once and really explain our model and how we work.
Cool. Okay, so let's move on to the last step where the coffee goes, and that's the dry mill.
Yes.
And if things get screwed up here, it's going to ruin all the hard work at the farm and at the buying stations, with the relationship level. All that work could be ruined here. But seeing your guys' operation, it's very immaculate, organized, clean. You guys have state-of-the-art milling equipment. So most people aren't really familiar. What happens at the dry mill? So besides cupping and besides doing the quality here and creating blends and microlots, what actually happens in the dry mill?
In the dry mill. So the dry mill takes the coffee from when it's finished at the farm level. It's still surrounded by that parchment, and inside is that green bean that you guys roast, of course. And so the purpose of the dry mill is to remove that parchment, sort the beans by size so that the sizes are homogeneous, the final product. So when you guys are roasting, you don't have some big beans and some small beans. And then to remove defects or beans that could affect the cup quality. And then the dry mill does this entire process for us. Back in the day, you would just remove the parchment and then there would be people sorting out by hand. But now we have a machine that sorts by weight, so it knows the heavy beans from the light beans, and another one that sorts by color, which removes some of these defective beans. I don't like to call them defective beans. I mean, they are defective beans, basically. It doesn't sound as nice. But
they're not tasty.
They're not tasty.
But something to know is these coffees are purchased. They're not thrown away.
They're not thrown away.
There's buyers for this coffee.
There's buyers for every coffee.
Which is good. I mean, it adds value. But when you're drinking really cheap commercial coffee, it's not.
This stuff, yeah.
We can. Not the greatest.
Bobby can show a picture of it perhaps later. So that's what the mill does. It removes the parchment, it sorts by size, and then it removes the defective beans, effectively to get a final product,
right?
A final exportable quality product.
You have a few machines. The coolest one's a laser one. Is it lasers?
It's air. It's air.
Okay. So the beans like shuffle through this machine super fast, just gravity.
Yep.
And when it sees certain colors that you identify as defects, it'll push it out.
Yeah, without getting too technical, we do a lot of crazy things with that machine. But in general, yeah, it looks for when it's flying down the tray. It has a camera actually on both sides, and then it has there's an air compressor, and it's like shooting it out. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So that actually is that's the final step, and then from there it gets packed into the bags. But I do want to elaborate on right before it goes into the machine as well.
Yeah.
Every single coffee that we buy, every single lot, whether it's like a crazy micro lot or it's for the regional blends, has a code. And when we go in the system and look in at that code, I know who the farmer is, what's the weight of that lot, what's the point score. And then when we send the instructions to the team at the mill, we send literally just the codes. And that's how we are able to keep every lot. That's how we stay organized, basically. And that's how we know we don't mess up with when we put together a micro lot or a big regional lot. It's not just a huge pile of coffees down there in parchment. It's literally separated by these codes.
Right.
And the codes tells us everything about the coffee.
Yeah, it's a lot of attention to detail that your staff has.
A lot
your warehouse
of attention.
managers, they all know not to mix these and to,
totally.
There's a lot of work that goes into
There's a lot of work. It's true. It's 100% a detail-oriented job at that point. All of the work that everybody has done, from the farmer to the buyers, like, it's now in their hands to make sure that we don't have any issues. But with the coding system, it's really difficult to have an error, because we'll say, okay, it's just say it's lot 1, lot 2, lot 3. They literally go and pull, okay, lot 1 is 8 bags, and they'll count, I got 8 bags here, and they'll take it in front and dump in those 8 bags into the mill. So it's really
all the coffee we've gotten from you has been super consistent. It is what we buy, and it's great stuff. It's cool to see what happens here. So there you have it, from the farm to the buying stations to these relationships to here at the mill and the cupping lab. This is what separates specialty coffee from commercial coffee.
100%.
And it adds a lot of value for the farmers. It adds value for us consumers, because we're getting a special product that tastes better and is unique and really highlights where it comes from. So we thank you for all the work you guys do here.
We thank you for the support.
Yeah. There you have it.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.